You have heard about oligarchs who answer to Putin, but what about those he cannot touch? In this video, we show how Russia's richest billionaires outsmart sanctions, disappear from surveillance, and build private empires that can rival nations. One of them even controls a supply chain so vital that removing him could crash global food markets. Stay until the end to find out how he escaped Putin's grip and changed the rules of Russian power. Dmitri Mazepin, the phantom oligarch who outsmarted the Kremlin. Dmitri Mazepin is not the richest man in Russia. He is not the most photographed either, but he may be the most ungovernable because even the Kremlin cannot trace the leash on him. While other oligarchs move in Putin's orbit, making gas deals or competing for televised favor, Mazepin moves in silence, not hiding, but operating behind over 40 offshore trusts from the British Virgin Islands to the UAE, stitched together by lawyers fluent in ambiguity. His holdings are not draped in gold or moored in Monaco. There's no $500 million yacht flying his flag, no football club eating up headlines. Instead, Mazepin controls something more volatile than oil: food infrastructure. Through his control of Uralchem and Uralkali, he moves the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate that feed farms from Brazil to Bangladesh. His reach extends to 1 in 5 bags of fertilizer sold globally. That is a quiet kind of dominance, but in times of food crisis, it becomes louder than tanks. Combined, Uralchem and Uralkali are valued by independent analysts at over $10 billion, though much of that is hidden beneath shell companies in Switzerland, Cyprus, and Hong Kong. These are not just corporate shields, they're bunkers. In 2022, when sanctions began to hit, Mazepin was briefly listed by the EU only to have exemptions granted weeks later. Because when one man can make wheat too expensive in 6 countries, you don't sanction him, you negotiate with him. And Mazepin knew that. That is the brilliance of his empire. No titles, no assets in his name, no fingerprints on any transaction. Yet everything still moves at his command. He does not attend Kremlin banquets. He does not have to, because the leverage he holds isn't Russian, it's global. Where others show strength through headlines, he manipulates with market pressure. Where others pose with luxury watches, he watches entire harvests rise and fall based on his logistics. There is no luxury in his visibility, only strategy in his absence. He is the oligarch who never shows up because he's already there written into the global food chain. Comment power in disguise if you believe true dominance doesn't shine under spotlights. It's wired into the infrastructure no one can afford to unplug. Andrey Melnichenko and the militarized super yacht strategy. Some men buy yachts. Andrey Melnichenko built a warship disguised as one. At first glance, his sailing yacht A is a floating sculpture of glass and steel, stretching 468 feet long and rising 8 decks high, with masts taller than Big Ben. But beneath its reflective surface is something built for more than pleasure. This isn't just the most expensive sailing yacht in the world, reportedly costing $500 million. It's a floating stronghold designed for disappearance. Every inch of the vessel reflects paranoia refined into luxury. The hull is embedded with military-grade radar scramblers, jamming external tracking systems. Anti-drone defenses protect its airspace. Internal access is restricted by biometric fingerprint scanners, locking every suite, control room, and navigation chamber. The glass is blast-resistant. The walls are rumored to be reinforced with radar-absorbing paint. A stealth trick borrowed from the defense sector, not the yachting world. There's no casino on board. No Instagram-ready hot tubs spilling over Monaco harbors. That was never the goal. This ship was built as a sovereign zone capable of slipping into international waters and disappearing from satellites. And it did. When EU sanctions hit in 2022, most oligarchs rushed to hide their assets. Melnichenko's yacht was already gone. It slipped out of port in Italy just days before being frozen, cutting off communication and vanishing from international maritime databases. For weeks, no one could prove where it was. Some reports say it reappeared in Turkey, others say it never left the Red Sea. But the brilliance is not only in the escape, it's in what the ship stands for. Unlike palaces or jets, Sailing Yacht A is a mobile fortress able to relocate not just assets, but people, conversations, and strategy. It can carry entire command ecosystems offshore, equipped with encrypted satellite uplinks, onboard intelligence centers, and enough fuel to cross oceans without stopping. It is not a display of wealth, it's a demonstration of independence. In a world where governments freeze bank accounts and ground private jets, Melnichenko turned his fortune into a floating exception to the rules. This yacht does not show off for paparazzi. It was not made to be seen, it was made to disappear with power intact. Because in modern oligarchy, survival isn't about what you show the world. It's about what you can remove from it without leaving a trace. Alexey Mordashov and the art of corporate disappearance. When sanctions targeted Russian billionaires, most of them reacted. Alexey Mordashov vanished, but not by leaving Moscow or boarding a jet. He disappeared on paper, on spreadsheets, in legal filings across 5 jurisdictions. And what disappeared wasn't just a man. It was more than $29 billion in corporate control, routed through a labyrinth only he could navigate. At the center of his empire stood Severstal, one of Russia's largest steel producers, once valued north of $15 billion on the public markets. But Mordashov did not just hold steel. He held influence in banking, tourism, logistics, and tech. And he knew that exposure meant weakness. So he did what most oligarchs didn't have the foresight or speed to do. In the days before sanctions locked down transfers, Mordashov quietly shifted his shares in Nordgold and Seaver Group to relatives, offshore trusts, and obscure shell companies registered in the British Virgin Islands, the Seychelles, and Liechtenstein. The names on the paperwork changed. The money did not move. Control stayed exactly where it had always been, with him just one layer deeper. On the surface, Mordashov was losing it all. News outlets ran headlines about the billionaire targeted by Western regulators. But inside his legal vault, the assets were simply repurposed under new fronts. A holding company dissolved here, a Cayman-based entity formed there. Public perception worked in his favor. And while investigators were still mapping the original network, he had already rebuilt it. It was not simple evasion. It was choreography, designed smokescreens, timed liquidations, misleading filings. Mordashov didn't run from the fire. He redirected it toward shadows that couldn't be sanctioned. And just when regulators thought they'd cornered him, they found that the pieces no longer added up. Ownership was fractured, responsibility was ambiguous, liability legally unfound. What makes his strategy so powerful isn't just the money preserved, it's the delay he engineered into the system. Every day a regulator spent untangling his structure was a day he kept operating, signing contracts, moving resources, reinforcing defenses. Unlike other oligarchs who bought yachts or built fortresses, Mordashov built fog, a corporate fog thick enough to lose $29 billion of empire in plain sight. And when the air clears, the empire will still be there, only harder to find and even harder to touch. Vladimir Lisin and the Steel Empire hidden in code. Most Russian oligarchs built fortresses of concrete, oil, or ships. Vladimir Lisin built his out of encrypted data, and unlike yachts or villas, this empire does not glitter, it disappears. Lisin's fortune, estimated at over $23 billion, is forged in steel. Through his company, Novolipetsk Steel, NLMK, he controls one of Russia's largest steel production and logistics networks, supplying everything from high-grade sheets for infrastructure to specialized alloys that quietly feed into Russia's defense manufacturing pipeline. But the real genius isn't in what he makes, it's in how he hides it. Every layer of Lisin's empire has been reinforced with digital armor. His logistics hubs operate inside Faraday-shielded control rooms, blocking wireless signals and preventing remote breaches. Communications between divisions run on air-gapped systems, networks physically disconnected from the internet. It is the kind of architecture more commonly found in nuclear facilities or intelligence agencies. Even contracts and shipping manifests are routed through blockchain and spread internal ledgers unlinked from Russian state databases. Data packets are encrypted, triple authenticated, and routed through satellite uplinks in Switzerland. It is not just security, it's industrial cloaking. While some oligarchs leverage private armies, Lisin uses cyber infrastructure. His IT divisions include former intelligence officers, cryptographers, and international compliance attorneys. Their mission is not defense, it's invisibility. And invisibility works. When Western sanctions began freezing assets and grounding jets, Lisin's operations remained untouched. His supply chain does not look openly Russian. It looks on paper like a decentralized web of trading companies across Austria, Belgium, the UAE, and Singapore. Some clients never even realized they were sourcing from Russian mills. But make no mistake, the core remains Russian and powerful. His steel is still feeding both civilian and defense sectors. He just ensured it passes through a dozen filters before anyone notices. This isn't just about hiding wealth. It's about future-proofing influence. When your product builds cities, railways, and military equipment, and your data hides like a ghost, you don't need headlines, you need opacity. And that is exactly what Lisin built. A steel empire coded in silence. Comment encrypted power if you believe the strongest fortresses today aren't made of stone. They're built in servers, air gaps, and firewalls designed to never be found. Igor Sechin, Putin's enforcer with a fragile throne. Igor Sechin does not smile for cameras. He does not need to, because for nearly 2 decades, he's been the most feared man in Russian business, second only to Vladimir Putin in both power and paranoia. As the CEO of Rosneft, Russia's largest state oil company valued at over $75 billion, Sechin doesn't just manage energy, he controls the lifeblood of the Russian economy. But Rosneft is only the surface. Sechin's real value is his reach, his ability to wield state resources as private instruments. He commands the loyalty of former intelligence officers, elite security units, and political operatives scattered across ministries and embassies. His operations don't begin at boardroom tables. They begin in encrypted briefings, hotel basements, and off-the-record flights to Caracas, Riyadh, and Beijing. Under Sechin's leadership, Rosneft expanded into Venezuela, brokered pipeline deals with China worth over $40 billion, and locked down Arctic drilling rights that reshaped global oil logistics. But with every signature, he also drew attention. The kind that does not just sanction your name, it follows your shadow. Sechin isn't just a CEO, he is an operator. The kind who rewrites contracts at midnight and replaces ministers by morning. Insiders refer to him as Russia's Darth Vader, not for style, but for accuracy. He's built a fortress around himself using secrecy, silence, and political leverage. His inner circle is hand-picked from former FSB officials and military veterans. His meetings leave no digital trace. His travel is masked by diplomatic immunity. And yet, for all this force, Sechin has grown vulnerable. Because in today's Russia, proximity to power is both armor and exposure. When sanctions hit, he was among the first targeted. His overseas assets froze. His name became a liability in boardrooms from Geneva to Singapore. And as Putin's circle contracts under international pressure, Sechin stands out. Too close, too visible, too well known. Even his own fortress is not without cracks. Internal Rosneft leaks, rumored disputes with Kremlin advisors, and the increasing scrutiny of foreign regulators have chipped away at the myth. His throne, once made of pipeline steel, now shows stress lines. Because when your empire is built on state contracts, global oil routes, and geopolitical secrets, you don't just need control, you need deniability. And that's something even Igor Sechin is starting to lose. Roman Abramovich and the poison that changed everything. Roman Abramovich used to be the most visible billionaire in Russia. Owner of Chelsea Football Club, frequent guest in London's elite circles, and the face of the polished oligarch who blended wealth with Western respectability. His net worth once peaked above $14 billion, built around steel companies, real estate, private jets, and one of the most expensive art collections in Europe. He didn't just survive post-Soviet capitalism, he mastered it. But that version of Abramovich no longer exists. In early 2022, during back-channel peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, Abramovich reportedly suffered symptoms consistent with poisoning. The incident was not fatal, but it was transformative. Something snapped. He began vanishing. Not physically, but strategically. The man who once courted the press now retreated behind layers of trusts, diplomatic shielding, and legal veils, more intricate than any offshore spreadsheet. The sale of Chelsea FC wasn't just a business transaction, it was a pressure release. He offloaded the crown jewel of his public persona for $5.25 billion, pledging the proceeds to humanitarian causes, a move as political as it was reputational. Behind the scenes, assets were shuffled. His $700 million yacht, Eclipse, disappeared from radar. Properties across London, Street, Barts, and the Côte d'Azur were quietly transferred to relatives and foundations. Even his Gulfstream G6 50 jet began flying erratic, indirect routes registered under newly formed holding firms. Abramovich now exists in a zone few oligarchs dare to enter, between diplomacy and disappearance. He is reportedly the only Russian billionaire with a Ukrainian passport, a fact neither officially denied nor officially confirmed, and one that adds ambiguity to his legal position. His status as an informal intermediary in international negotiations has granted him a form of untouchable mobility. But that mobility depends entirely on secrecy. He no longer gives interviews. His photos are rare. But his influence remains embedded in art auctions, equity holdings, and advisory boards, always one level removed from exposure. It is not exile, it's reinvention. Where others lost control, Abramovich became volatility itself. Impossible to sanction cleanly, too visible to ignore, yet too restructured to corner. His real wealth is not held in banks anymore. It's held in silence, plausible deniability, and the ghostly outlines of what used to be transparency, because the most dangerous man in the room is no longer the one giving orders. It's the one no one is sure is still there at all. Leonid Mikhelson's offshore labyrinth of liquid gas. Leonid Mikhelson does not hold press conferences. He does not sit for interviews. But behind the silence stands a man who controls one of the most critical arteries in global energy. As CEO and co-owner of Novatek, Russia's second-largest natural gas producer, Mikhelson does not chase publicity. He engineers permanence. His estimated net worth, once touching $24 billion, is structured like a sovereign hedge fund spread across shell companies in Luxembourg, Cyprus, and the UAE, each with their own boards, proxies, and firewall-tight legal shields. His asset protection model is not flashy, it's forensic. And nowhere is it more evident than in the way he kept Yamal LNG alive when Western sanctions tried to kill it. Yamal LNG is one of the world's most ambitious Arctic gas projects, with a price tag of $27 billion. Built on permafrost, powered by French engineering and Chinese capital, it should have collapsed under geopolitical pressure. But it didn't, because Mikhelson planned for that too. His gas doesn't move through one pipeline. It moves across a fleet of ice-breaking LNG tankers financed through Japanese leasing, registered in Caribbean tax havens, and insured in reinsurance pools designed to dodge Western underwriting restrictions. Each vessel is a floating loophole capable of delivering cargo to India, China, and Southeast Asia without ever touching Western-controlled terminals. The operation's digital layer is even harder to trace. Communications run on encrypted networks built by ex-military technologists. Legal documentation is compartmentalized, updated hourly across international time zones, and filed in jurisdictions where compliance takes months to verify. If a regulator starts an audit in London, the contracts mutate in Qatar before breakfast, and Mikhelson is never in the room when deals close. That is by design. His lawyers close doors before his name even enters the building. His ownership is always one title removed, and every public holding is backed by a cascade of silent partnerships and irrevocable trusts. While other oligarchs show strength through assets, Mikhelson flexes through architecture. His empire runs on gas, but survives through calculated anonymity. That's what makes him untouchable. Not because he fights back, but because he's never truly there when the fight begins. In the world of post-sanctioned oligarchy, Mikhelson isn't just surviving, he's winning. By turning legal voids, geopolitical cracks, and cold air into an invisible pipeline of power no one can seize. How Russia's billionaires built a state beyond borders. When sanctions froze assets and revoked visas, Russian billionaires didn't panic. They did not need to, because their real home wasn't Moscow. It was built inside offshore trusts, holding firms and routing numbers. Before Western authorities ever reached the yachts or jets, the wealth had already moved into four-layer ownership structures spread across Liechtenstein, Cyprus, Singapore, and the Caymans. A $300 million asset might be technically owned by 5 entities in 5 countries. That's not secrecy, that's architecture. This network is not hidden, it's engineered. The most powerful oligarchs, Leonid Mikhelson, Dmitri Mazepin, Alexey Mordashov, don't rely on Kremlin protection. They rely on legal arbitrage, moving assets faster than regulators can react. One lawsuit might take 3 years to chase a holding company that changed names last quarter. And these webs keep growing. Real estate in London, tech startups in Dubai, equity firms in Geneva. These oligarchs didn't just hide wealth. They franchised it, building machines that earn and protect capital on autopilot. That is why seizing power is nearly impossible. It does not sit in a palace. It's buried inside thousands of contracts defended by compliance teams more agile than government regulators. You can sanction a man, but how do you freeze a structure that's designed to disappear? Many have not lived in Russia for years, and they haven't needed to. Their real state does not exist on any map. It exists between borders, in the space where laws don't overlap. Russia has territory, but its billionaires built a floating empire stitched together by code, contracts, and concealment. The kind of empire that doesn't collapse. It simply roots around the world. Comment invisible nation if you believe some empires are built not from land, but from the space between laws. The kind of empires that don't collapse. They simply root around the ruins. From armored superyachts to offshore gas kingdoms, these billionaires don't just survive Putin's regime. They maneuver around it using encryption, legal smokescreens, and global infrastructure to stay untouchable. Dmitri Mazepin's invisibility. Melnichenko's militarized yacht and Mordashov's corporate sleight of hand are not stories of excess. They are blueprints for post-national power. If this gave you a new view into Russia's real power players, press like, subscribe to Billionaire Story, and turn on the bell so you never miss the secrets hiding behind the spotlight.